I think we got 1:30, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone, for the last day. It's good to see actually a pretty decent crowd here still. We weren't sure with people flying out home, trying to get home early and things like that, how big of a crowd we'd have. My name is Christy Weekly, and I'm joined by April Olson, and we are program managers based out of Fargo, and we concentrate on the areas of general ledger and financial reporting. So what we're going to talk about today is financial reporting specifically. And some of the things we're going to take a look at, or our goals, are to just first understand the viewing experience that we have within operations. Next, April is actually going to go over some basics around modifying and creating the financial reports within the Financial Report Designer. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to give you a little bit of a preview of the new CFO workspace that we created, which will be a new embedded workspace within operations in the upcoming release, the spring release. So it's not out yet. So that's a high-level agenda. So I'm actually going to start, and I'll cover more of the operations aspect of it. So really where we're going to start is, okay, you've already designed your reports. Now you actually want to go and view them or generate them. We'll kind of go through some of the basics of that within operations. So you can see here a couple of things that we have. We do ship, just like we used to with MR out of the box, 20 default reports. We still can drill into those reports and get all the way down to the transaction or the account or the transaction detail. So we still have all of that capability. We do have some search capability. We do see sometimes where customers are looking at a financial statement and they just want to quickly type in like payables or something like that and have it just jump you down to the payables section of the report. So we do have that built into the system. We can, of course, print and export the report, and we'll show a lot of these. And I'll actually do a quick little demo of something you can do, which is how to just even pin these to workspaces. A lot of people don't realize that these are pinnable, so we'll kind of show that. And then we'll talk a little bit about the report itself, the report options, how you can use the tree from within operations, and then just some of the different scenarios around changing the date or the scenario. So before we jump into this, we do want to understand the audience a little bit. Just quick hands, how many are partners in the audience? So most. And then obviously the rest are probably either customers or I know Microsoft, a couple Microsoft employees that are here. Just also another show of hands, how many are familiar with Management Reporter? Okay. So just, one little thing we wanted to talk about is, there's a little bit of confusion. We still probably will slip and call this Management Reporter. It technically is not Management Reporter. We still do have Management Reporter that is still there for, customers that are on Dynamics 2012, for the GP customers, that's all still there. It's all supported. There was some rumors, we're deprecating it. No, we're not. So Management Reporter is still in place. But what we've done is we've actually used the basis of Management Reporter for financial reporting within operations. So, of course, you're going to see a lot of similarities. We still use the Report Designer. April will go through and show a lot of that for how you actually design your reports. But some really big differences, of course, that many of you might have seen or will learn about today is that we used to have a desktop viewer and a web viewer, and those technically are not used anymore because now our viewer is operations itself. That is your web viewer. So some things we'll maybe kind of point out as we go along a little bit that we get questions on is, well, you used to be able to add comments. So I'll throw that one out there because we get this question a lot. And we can't add comments yet. So we used to have that with the existing desktop viewer, web viewer, but we don't have it yet with the view capability that we have within operations. We're adding, right? So this is kind of a process. We're going to slowly add these things back. We know we need to fill these gaps. But I just want to make sure everyone is clear. We technically are not showing you Management Reporter anymore. It really is financial reporting within operations. Any questions on that or need clarification on any of it? Everything's clear? All right. So we're going to just jump into a lot of demo. So like I was saying, operations really is the experience now for your financial reports for viewing and generating. So under General Ledger, let's down here. Actually, it was already open. We have our financial reports available, and we'll just take a look here. And some things you'll notice, you're going to see a few things new from potentially those of you that are familiar with either the 7.0 AX release or the 7.1 release. So you can see on the far left side of the form, here is your list of your report definitions that we've created within the system. One thing you might have recognized or realized back in the report designer is you could actually group them together by folders. We did not have that previously within operations, but now you can see we do have that. This is coming in the spring release. So you can see here I've got some budget reports. I have some consolidations. I'll just close that folder. And then here again are those default reports that we talked about out of the box. These are the same default reports that we had before. These just automatically ship based on your account categories. April will show you how you can go in and just quickly modify these, personalize them to meet whatever requirements you have within your organization. So those reports are really all the same. But now at least we do have the folders. Of course, we have the filter capability that we have, with a lot of our forms in general across operations. You can do that. The one thing I wanted to show is the filtering and the pinning capability. So I don't have a great workspace for this right now, but let's say that you wanted to pin this filtered view of these financial reports onto like a budgeting workspace. So I just want to show you can create the filter, and just like with a lot of your other pages, you can choose to add it to a workspace. You can see here I had it defaulting to the general ledger processing one, but let's see here. Where did the ledger and budget one? There's ledger, budgets, and forecast. So if we want, we could add it to that workspace. We could choose configure. And just to make it easier for me to find it, I'm just going to call it my name. And we'll put a count on there. You can say OK. So we added that to the ledger and budget, was it? I should probably wrote it down. My memory isn't always the best, huh? Yep. And of course, it's processing this. But what you'll see when this comes up is you'll actually see the tile that's there. And what this does is it gives that persona, of course, assuming that they have the appropriate security rights, access to just that filtered list of the budget reports. And I probably picked a bad workspace to do this on, didn't I? There we go. Yeah, just cancel. I don't care about updating the balances. But you might have noticed there was the tile there, if you saw it. Let's cancel out of here. Come on. You know what we should have hardwired? I just realized that we're at the mercy of wireless here. So while this is going, kind of stuck. There we go. Okay, finally. All right, so here's our tile. And again, we can just use that tile, again, if I have the security, to get back to the financial reporting page. All right, let's go ahead. I'm just going to go back so I'm not filtered. We'll go back here. So let's just take a look here now at viewing. So let's say I want to look at this balance sheet. We're going to point out the good, the bad, and the ugly in our session. We're not marketing or sales. We tell it like it is. One thing you might have noticed with 7.0 and 7.1 is we didn't really have a true generate capability within operations for the reports. And people are like, well, what do you mean by that? Well, you might notice here on the balance sheet, I don't have any reports listed here. So I can view it, and the first time I do this, this really is triggering a generate. So it's going to run this report while I'm talking. But what I mean by not a true generate is, let's say that in the meantime, someone goes and adds a reporting tree to this report definition. If I'm within operations, I don't actually see those changes to the report definition that were made over in the designer until someone over in the designer hits generate. So changes to an existing report definition do not get consumed within operations. until the spring release. So now, if I go back here, you might have noticed we do now have a generate button up at the top. So we do have now the true concept of the generate within operations. So similar thing, if I want to see this balance sheet, I can now choose generate. You can see I did this for February previously. Now I can, maybe say that I want to do this. Actually, let's do 15. I think I have good data there. So it's going to add it to the batch job, and you can see it's actually going to run the generate process. Now, the one thing you might have noticed in that generate window is we only had the date right now. We're actually in the middle of developing this right now, literally. We're like, get this feature in before Tech Conference. We want to show it. So it just went in last week. We're going to keep adding more to that dialogue. So some things that we hear often are, I have a reporting tree, but I only want to generate the report for a subset of that reporting tree. I don't want to do everything on the reporting tree. So we're looking at adding things such as support for picking a node or a subnode of that reporting tree when you do the generate. So if you think back to the generate within Designer, we're really trying to mimic a lot of that and bring a lot of those properties forward into the dialogue that we'll have within operations. Even things such as letting you say, I want to print this report either at the financial level or financial and account or financial account and transaction. We'll give a lot of those options in that dialogue window. So you really have the full generate functionality just like within the Designer. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the additional things. I'm going to go back and view this report. Just a couple things to point out across the top here. This one is a default, so just keep in mind the default reports we have out of the box don't come with reporting trees assigned to them. We don't know your legal entities, and we don't know your financial dimensions, so there's no way we could actually create those out of the box. But again, remember, you can always go and modify these, add your own reporting tree and things like that. If you did have a reporting tree on it, I think April will maybe show this later, the reporting tree option will be available, and you can click the drop down here and you will see each node of that reporting tree, and you could choose to view the different levels of the tree right from within here. So that functionality is supported. The show, you can actually say I only want to see the headers or the footers or summary lines only, so you can view it at different levels. If I want to show, let me just go back. Oh, our December report popped up. If I want to zoom in or zoom out, we have that capability. I'll come back to publish in just a second. Currency was another big request that we heard from a lot of customers. A lot of customers will want to look at their financial reports in different reporting currencies. So you can see here now we actually show every reporting currency that you have defined within operations. And it will translate your financial statement using all of the settings that are defined on the main account for the exchange rate types that are defined and the method it should use to do the translation. Export, we can, of course, export this to Excel. A couple things that we did add with this. We saw a couple customers where they were, I can't remember if it was a P&L or a balance sheet, and they chose to export it to Excel, and it would just take forever. Well, the problem was when they were exporting it, their report included transaction level detail. And there was no way previously to say only export just at the financial level or the account level. So what we did is we did add these options here now. So whenever you export or print is also the same, you can choose what level you want to export or print. We are never going to default transaction to yes, because that can be a lot of data. We didn't, of course, want to take it away completely because we do understand some customers may have reports that are very focused on maybe a specific account number or something like that, where they do want the transaction detail to be exported. And so we'll still support that. We just don't want to make it a default to being on. So you can go ahead and choose the level. We also did add here where you can choose to show, if I add the account detail, I can show the segments in separate columns when it exports to Excel, which is a really common request that we have across operations in general. So that's also an option that we have included. The report options. So some of these report options we may eventually get rid of. So you might notice here we have the base period and the base year. So this was before we had the True Generate. This was how you could come in and run the report again for a different date. Now that we have the Generate button and the date is there, these fields are actually going to get removed. They should have been already removed, but they will be removed before the spring. So those will go away, and you can just use the True Generate now to generate for different dates. But we still want to support, of course, some of the basic filtering capability. So, for example, if you want to filter on specific attributes or a specific dimension, let's say I want to run this report specifically for business unit 001, I can go ahead and choose that and then run OK. And it will actually filter the existing version of the report that I'm looking at to just the transactions for that business unit, for that report. Scenarios is another one that we'll see customers use, and typically this is around budgeting scenarios. So if you think about some of your financial reports, often you'll have like a side-by-side of actual versus budget. And that budget, you might have actually defined a specific budget model on, but maybe you want to run this for a different budget model. That's what scenarios gives you. So you can come in here and actually choose a different budget model, and the report will be generated using that new budget that you've told us. Now, this is a one-time thing. It's not going to actually go back to your report designer, and it's not going to change the budget that you've defined on the column or wherever you've defined it. It's just a one-time change just for this instance of when you're running the report. Okay, so a couple other things here, too. If I go ahead, I'm just going to cancel out of this. A couple little things that sometimes we get questions on is customers will ask, well, what if I'm looking at this and transactions get posted and I want to update the report to actually see those transactions, the impact of it. So assuming all of our data has been updated, there is a refresh button right here on the page itself. I've kind of debated whether we should actually just move that to be a button to make it more clear. But you can use this refresh button. And what it will do is it will actually go and regenerate the report using the newest data that's in the data mart. So if those additional transactions have been posted and are updated, the report will now reflect those new transactions. And a lot of times this is where people will use the publish button. So you can see I just refreshed it, and now I can choose to publish it. So publish is essentially saying, take whatever changes just happened to the report that I was looking at, and now with those changes, I want to publish it back to the list of the reports. So if we publish this, all that it's saying, I'll just wait till this is done, is back on my list. It's updated, and if I view that report back on the previous list, I now have an updated version of that report. All right. Oop. Of course, there was no changes to it, but here we can see it's updated. So now I have my first version of it, and I have my second version of it with different times on it. So that's what the publish button does. Questions so far in anything within operations?
What is the reason why you have to publish it? Why couldn't someone just click here and generate?
Yeah, great question. The question is, why do I have to publish it? Why can't I just come back here and hit generate? You could. Now that we have generate, it should do the exact same thing, yes.
But it's not because of performance or anything like
No, it's not because of performance. It was, again, just because before we really did not have a true generate. Now that you have a true generate, again, that might be something that we just choose to get rid of that button altogether. So really moving forward into the future, just kind of thinking forward, and we're always looking for feedback, right? Some of the buttons you see across the top may completely go away. We're always looking at how we can do things better, make things more clear. I already mentioned like report options. Those dates will go away from in there. Well, really what you're left with is almost changing filters. So maybe it really becomes a filter option rather than a report option. So we might be renaming a few buttons and things like that and organizing it to make it a little bit more clear to the end user what's happening. Any other questions so far? Okay, I'm just going to, one little thing, just want to show, I know some of you are familiar with 2012. One of the big things we often got requests for was to be able to freeze panes. So we do have that. You'll notice now if you do scroll, the headers and the column labels are frozen now. So we did build that into the operations view. So that was a pretty requested feature that we had with the in-market stuff. Okay, one other quick thing. I'll just kind of show that search that we talked about. So if I want to search on payables or payable, you can just see here that the search will just take my focus. You can see the blue outline. It'll take the focus to that. And then if there are, you can see here 6 results found. You can just keep hitting the next, and it will take you to the appropriate location in the report based on that search that you completed. All right. Trying to think if I missed anything. I think I've got most of it. Questions? Yes? So the question is, when you send it to Excel, does it still repeat the header information and things like that? It should only be there once in Excel, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
Normally when we 2012 or other versions, when we export it out in Excel, that header of the report, as many pages as they are.
Oh, it repeated the header. I don't believe it does it. I think it actually does just the one, but we'll have to double check. It's a good question. Yeah, it does the dimensions in separate columns that we showed before, but yeah, I think it only does the one header. I guess I've exported it before and I wasn't even paying attention, but I believe it does just the one. Yeah. Yeah, we'll get it written down to check it out. Oh yeah. Let me go back. I should have definitely shown that. I'm going to do the December one because I think I may have better data there than the 2012 or the 2017. Yeah, you can definitely still do the drill down. So if I want to see the detail behind this, I can drill. So now I went from the financial level. Now I'm down to the account level. If I want to see the transaction detail behind a balance, when you click on this, you have a couple different options. You can go to the transaction. Oh, actually, it just went right to the transactions. But yes, it'll take you to the transactions behind the detail for that. Yeah, so the question is, can you control the columns? So we just took you right into voucher trans. So whatever you can see for voucher trans, regardless of where you access that, is going to be the columns that you see. But it's an interesting question because one thing we do want to improve on in the future, and we are looking at, is adding better dynamic reporting, because we obviously hear on financial reports that people want more subledger information. So one of the big things we're looking at is when you do get to an account level, let's say you could add additional columns and say, only show me the accounts that maybe have transactions for vendor XYZ. And vendor XYZ is not a financial dimension. It's just a dimension in the system that you want to report on. So that's ultimately where we want to get, and then also even taking it a step further to the transaction level to really fill out that whole end-to-end scenario for better analysis reporting around that. Now, with that said, it may mean that we're not going to voucher trans. Maybe we're going to go to something called the Accounting Source Explorer. Some of you maybe are familiar with that. That does give us more information about some of these transactions, such as subledger information. And if we can be more intelligent with what we're showing there or not showing there, that's kind of where we're looking at heading in the future. There's a question in the back, and I'll come to Dean. Yep, so you're just back at the... Yep, so back here. Oh, X'd out one too many times. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, I've got two versions you can see of the same report, same date. How do I know which one is really the final version of it? This is actually something we're talking about a little bit right now. I mean, right now you can see the date and the time. So more than likely the last one generated is going to be the most likely. I didn't say always, right? So most likely that will be the final one. But something we're doing, and we'd love feedback, is we're thinking about maybe even adding a status on here where you could actually say it's a draft or a final report. So is that something people would like? Okay. Another thing, too, kind of back to the comment thing we talked about before. What level of comments do people need? This is something we're trying to get feedback on, because we've also thought about just adding a comment column here, which could be used even for saying whether it's draft or final, rather than having an actual state. So there's different ways we can address it, right? We could do a status and a comment. We could do just comments. We obviously have heard comments are often needed at the line level, so we definitely have heard that. But is there also a benefit to having a comment at the report level? Anyone have requirements for that at all? Or is a state really what people are more looking for? Quiet group? Yes. Sure. Sure. Yep. Sure. And a lot of times people might come and regenerate it for internal purposes, right? I mean, I've already sent off the final, but now I want to look at it from my slice, my department. So there might be those types of scenarios where that last date and time isn't necessarily the final version. But you bring up an interesting point, too, where we want to get is to be able to actually have these reports, kind of like I showed pinned, to the CFO dashboard that will show at the end of the session, so that your CFO can actually get access to those reports. So that's something we're kind of thinking about with, maybe pushing those published or those final state reports automatically to a workspace for the CFO, so they have access to those also. Is some things we're thinking about. Again, we'll take feedback on it as we're kind of designing and thinking through it, but that's kind of some of the places we're thinking of going. Question? Yeah. Actually, you're leading right into what I was just going to show next. So the question or the point is this list can get really big because a lot of people generate these reports. It can become unmanageable. So some things we are looking at, and one thing we did already add is we do have a delete option that was just introduced. I believe this might actually be available as a hot fix. It's for sure coming in the spring release. So what you can definitely do is clear out, delete out those not final, the draft reports. But another thing I'm kind of thinking about a little bit is how can we organize them maybe by folders? Some things that we did kind of support previously where you could have report packages and things like that. Or things around archiving, where once the report is published, and archiving can mean different things to different people. It might be sending it to a SharePoint site. It might be emailing it. So we have to kind of think through some of those and get feedback from customers and partners as to the best approach to some of those things. But yeah, hopefully the delete at least will help a little bit for now with the organization and keeping it manageable. And then as we add more of the archiving or the publishing capability, hopefully we can keep this list cleaned out a little bit better. Okay, I think I've shown everything I need to within operations. With that, I think I'm going to hand it over to April.
So today today I'm going to focus a little bit on the financial report designer. By the show of hands, there was a lot of people that were pretty familiar with Management Reporter, so a lot of this won't change. But I do want to cover it. It's a 101 session. I want to make sure everybody is aware of some of the capabilities. So the report designer today is still a click once designer. So what that means is when you are in that report list that Christy showed you and you want to edit a report or create a new one, it will actually launch a click once application that you have to authenticate to. Excuse me. And then you will be using a designer that's really familiar to you. It's very similar to Management Reporter with some of the exceptions removed for stuff that's not supported any longer in operations. So for those of you that are fairly new to it, today our reports are broken out into what we call rows and columns. So rows kind of defining what your report looks like going down the page, the descriptions, the formatting. Columns kind of telling you what does it look like going across the page, what type of dates, what type of side-by-side reporting that you might have. And then we have what are called reporting trees, and we'll create one of those today. And the reporting trees are really that reporting hierarchy that allows you to look at this report across business unit, cost centers, companies, and so on. We support two types of reporting trees, the ones that you create, modify, and maintain within the Financial Report Designer, and then we do support organization hierarchies. So organization hierarchies have a few limitations, but they can be used as reporting trees. And then we bring that all together with a report definition, which just kind of picks the row, picks the column, defines if you want to use a tree, and that's really what brings that report together. So I'm just going to spend a little time in the Report Designer today. And so you can launch the Report Designer by either editing an existing report, or you can click on New, and it will bring you to the designer. I've already signed into it, but again, it would ask you for that same username and password. And at the end of the session, we're going to talk a little bit about where we're going. So this is not what's going to be what you will see hopefully in a year. You know, we are, as Christy mentioned, bringing more and more of this into operations, and we are in a heavy process right now of redesigning this. So she'll talk a little bit about that at the end, and probably even try to promote some feedback from this wonderful group. So this is the Report Designer. As you can see, I have the rows, the columns, the reporting trees that I mentioned, and then a report definition. And let's just go ahead and go to the row definitions. And there's a couple things you can do. We do ship those reports out of the box based off the main account category, so it's really easy to take one of those and modify it if you'd like, or we can create new ones with accounts and ranges. So let's go ahead and take the summary income statement and just show you a little bit of, about the row definition. So really what's going down that left-hand pane is how that report's going to show when I generate it. So, you know, you can see where I've got the bolding. I have different totals and calculations. And then over on the far right is where we define main accounts and dimensions or categories. So let's use an example here where I'm going to modify this one, but I might want to break out my manufacturing expenses maybe in this report by the different departments. So let's go ahead and do a save as. And I'm just going to put expenses by department. And we'll just do an example where, let me just do manufacturing. I'm going to insert a couple of rows. And I'm actually going to do business unit. So I'll break this out by my two different major divisions. So I've changed my titles, and now what I want to do is I really want that manufacturing expenses, but I want it broken out by the different business units, so I should have renamed it differently. Now when you double click on that link to Financial Dimensions, and that's just kind of a tip for those of you that are new to Financial Report Designer, it is a little old, we understand that, which is why we're changing it. There's never really any drop downs that show, so if you want something, just double click it and you'll have everything will open up for lookup. So that's kind of the tip for financial reporting, is just double click. So when I double click, I can see that the dimensions that I have in the system, main account, business unit, department, cost center, and trading partner, and then account category. And what I want to do is I want my manufacturing expenses account category, but I also want it to bring only those for the home business unit. So just by clicking on that, an end user who doesn't understand tables, doesn't understand anything about how data is stored, is just saying, hey, this is what I care about. I want these accounts with this particular business unit. So I can go ahead and copy that And then I'm just going to change it for my auto division on this next line. Oh, I think I screwed up the, I'll change those. I think I mixed those two up. If I didn't, well, that's all right. Okay, so now what we've done is we can take that, and you saw I had a bunch of different business units, so I can kind of still build out. And really what this is showing you is that you can do any type of combination of main account dimensions over on this link to financial dimensions. And there's some advanced stuff you can do as well. I covered a little bit in the consolidation session that's after this today, but you can also do multiple chart of account mapping. So if you have different businesses with different chart of accounts, we can do some chart of account consolidation as well. So there's some more advanced stuff we can do as well with that column. So I could go ahead and I could break out each of my expenses maybe by the different business units. And just like that, I take an existing report, and now I have something I can apply with same column definitions, and I have a whole new look and feel in my report. So that's just a couple of things you can do with the row definition. I do want to show also a tip for anyone who hasn't used it before is instead of using account categories, sometimes you just want to say, I want to create a balance sheet. And so what I want is just, I don't want to have to pick every single balance sheet account in this row definition. There is, under the Edit menu, this Insert Rows from Dimensions. And you can, the ampersand character is the dimension that is going to populate when I click OK. So I'm just going to say all my balance sheet accounts start with 1 and they end with 39999. Okay, so even if some of those don't exist, just by doing that, now I've got this really good base for my balance sheet. All my accounts that are valid, that fall in that range, have been populated. And now I can start doing some insert and just go ahead and add those headings. Boy, I cannot type, hey? Do my formatting, and now I've got that really good starting point that I didn't have to manually pick and choose those dimensions. So I could go ahead, add my different sections, insert some rows, and with a matter of minutes, I really have my report ready to go. So just a couple of tips of things that you can do in the different row definitions.
I have a short question.
Yes?
If I have to use different languages and I want to insert a row definition, which language will be used?
It will use the language of, that's a fantastic question, the language that you have the system set up. So if
The main name of the...
yes, the main one. We do not have those translated dimension values yet. It is something we do get asked for. And I think once we get into operations and outside of this own specialized designer, that will be much easier for us to do. So that's a common request, and we'll definitely be much better about that once we get this product into operation. Yes, you would have to do that, unfortunately. Yep, and you'd have to manually do those values. So, yep, that unfortunately is how it will work for the data. All right, so now let's just take a quick review of column definitions. So column definitions, and I wanted to actually touch on a question that was asked earlier. We can define the column definitions. They can be side-by-side company, side-by-side department. They can be quarterly, quarter-to-date, trending. You really can make them pretty dynamic. You can actually do actual versus budget ones where if it's, the actuals period is completed, show actuals, and then show the future periods and budgets. You can do some pretty cool things with the column definition, as well as you can define certain columns that are only specific to the account and transaction level of the report. So I will touch on that a little bit. We do have what are called different column types. So I'll just add a description here that this is just defining where that description column is printed. And then we have, you can see FD, this just means like actual or budget data. We can do calculation columns, including, variances, if then else, and so on. And then there's some other things you can show, like if you want to show the account code, you can do that, and some pretty specific, formatting. When I choose the amounts from financial dimensions, the next row down is really important. This is where it defaults to actual, but this drop down is showing all the different budgets, submodels and models from the budget module, as well as all the different ones from budget planning. So if anyone went to the budget planning session earlier today, anything that you can do from budget planning, you can actually report on here. And then we often see budget control used in public sector, but it's certainly not exclusive to public sector. You can actually do all your budget funds available reporting in here as well. So this is everything that you would create within operations, you would have the ability to report on here. I'm just going to choose actual and then touch a little bit on the fiscal year and period. So the fiscal year and period, when they say base is just the term we use, so base just means the report date. So if I generated it for March 31st, 2017, my base year is fiscal year 2017, and my base period is March. So why is that important? Let's go ahead, just add a couple columns here. And I want to do this year versus last year. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put in year-to-date for both of them. And then instead of having to hard code this to 2016 and then constantly update it every year, I can just do things like base -1. And now this will always be year-to-date for this year, and then this would be year-to-date for last year. So those fiscal year and periods allow you to do like the trending. So base to base -12 is going to always do that trending 12 months that crosses across the fiscal years. So again, it keeps it a bit more dynamic, so you can do quite a few different things in the columns. Now, kind of moving down, I'm just going to, again, comment on some of the most highly used areas since this is kind of a 101 session. You'll notice there is a dimension filter. So you'll probably recognize this window from the row definition. When I double click on that dimension filter, I have the same capabilities to pick those financial dimensions. So if you did want to do a side-by-side report, this is where you could do it. So I wanted my department side-by-side. I would go ahead and just pick sales and marketing for this column. And then I would basically copy the next column and choose my department side-by-side. So let me just do a quick copy here. And you could do a very easy side-by-side department report. So this would be operations. And there are things that you can do wildcarding. You can do ranges, so you don't have to define these all manually. So I'll just do a couple there. I think everyone understands the concept. So just like that now, I'd put my headings up here, and now I've got that side-by-side report. So I'm actually going to go with this one for now. And I'm going to change this to be periodic. And this is the report we're going to create with the transaction level attributes. All right, so now I've got the side-by-side report. I could add a calculation. Let's go ahead and add those together. Again, you can do if then else and more complex calculations. I just want to add B, C, and D. So I can certainly do B plus C plus D or just do B range D. Okay, so now let's talk about the question earlier, which was, can you define the columns that show when you drill down? Now, as Christy showed you the drill down the voucher transactions, that just opens up that window where you might go to Source Explorer going forward. If you chose to just drill down within the report itself, you can define what are called attributes. And so I'm going to choose this first type of attribute. And now when I double click on the next row down, these are all the different account and transaction level attributes that will show up as you drill down in the report based on what they're associated with. So we do some really cool audit reports with this because you'll notice we have created by, we have transaction date, journal number. You can actually do vendor and customer here. So if you want to drill down on that accounts payable account and see what vendor you're paying, you can add the vendor and the customer as well. So these are all the different fields that you can add. And I'm just going to do transaction date, and let's just do one more. Let's go ahead and add created by. And I'm going to go ahead, and you will see when I generate this that they don't show up until you get to the correct level. Okay. So just like that, we've got a side-by-side report, we've got a total, and then we've got a couple of transactions that we care about as we drill down. So I'm going to go ahead and save this as my column definition. Okay, so we've got a row, we've got a column. I'll probably just use the summary income statement. Those are all you need for a report. So now if I just wanted to create a new report, I'm in a report definition. I'm actually going to use a default one, since I didn't really finish my other one. And I'm going to choose that side by side that I just created. And I have enough for generating this report. Okay. But we do have those ability to do those reporting trees. So you'll notice when I click on the tree type drop down, this is where I have a reporting tree, which is the one that you create and define in the designer. Or if you do choose organization hierarchies, all the organization hierarchies that you have defined in operations are automatically integrated across. They're read-only and they are date effective because that's how the organization hierarchies work in operations. So I could just go ahead and choose the auto organization hierarchy. And when I generate this report, it's going to pick the hierarchy that is valid at the point in time of the report date. But let's go ahead and create a reporting tree instead. All right, so now if you'll look in the reporting trees, you'll notice that here's the organization hierarchies I just mentioned, but I can also create a new one. And when you create a new reporting tree, there's really, I keep hitting Alt-Tab instead of Alt-F1. There we go. When you create a new reporting tree, there's more the grid side, and then there's the graphical representation over on the left. Now, you can do a lot of things with reporting trees. You can add all your different companies. So really, you can have a multi-company, consolidated, aggregated report within a matter of seconds just by choosing each company. But we can also do department by cost center, business by department, and so on. So instead of building that out, again, I'm going to use that edit menu. And I'm going to do this insert reporting units from dimensions. Expand this window. And if you look up here, you can see I have business unit, department, cost center, and trading partner main account category. Let's do a department by cost center report. So I'm going to clear these check boxes. And now you can see how the hierarchy is going to be built below. I can restrict the ranges if I wanted to, or I can just click OK. And what it's going to do is it's going to build out that tree for me. So let's look over at the left here. I've got sales and marketing. I do have some values where I don't have a cost center defined, and then you can see trade shows and marketing campaign. So what it's done is it's created, here's that parent level, and then here is where I've got nothing defined, which is kind of more just the demo data issue. And then trade shows would be that department with cost center 007, and marketing campaign is that department with cost center 008. So it actually will quickly build out that hierarchy for you based on what you have posted in your system. So I'm going to save this as my department by cost center tree, and now I have a tree that I can apply to my report. Let's take it one step further. Let's go ahead and we want to roll up finance, IT, and HR into a single organization. So I'm going to insert a unit here, and I'm just going to call this administration. And now what I can do is use just drag and drop, and I can drag and drop any of these units right under those parents. So you can have as many levels here, as many different roll-ups that you would like. Okay, and that goes for across companies and across any of your dimensions. So you can create as many different levels as you'd like. I can just promote this one under the summary, and now I've got this whole new administrative unit. Okay, so I can collapse and expand. All right, let's go ahead and generate this report. Now, if any of you have ever presented, you know that it is presentation bad luck to try to do anything processing or generating when you're doing a demo, but we're going to do it. So, what did I call that? Department by cost center. So we're going to run it for 2015. Our demo data is a little bit better in 2015. I am going to open this report. All right, looks good. 12 of 2015. Let's go to that transaction level so I can show you those. Transaction attributes, and let's go ahead and generate it. I'm going to select all my units, and just like that, we have a report. So for those of you that have seen it, there's probably nothing new here. For those that are new, what you should be just taking away is this is very easy for finance and accounting to do. There's no IT involvement here. There's no understanding of tables or anything about the operations data model, and you can have a report just like that. So here I've got sales, operations, finance, my side-by-side. I added a reporting tree. Might not be the best scenario that I just put together, but I'd have that full drill-down capability I could look at for any unit of the reporting tree. So in a sense, I almost have about 20 reports here in one. If I wanted to drill down into this $407, I can keep drilling all the way till I get to the option, and here's that account transactions that Christy showed you. Again, you'll notice those created by and that transaction date have not shown up yet, and the minute I go to transaction level, those columns will show because that's where they're relevant, and you'll see them populate here on the screen. So there they are. Okay, and I can see full auditing. It was Tricia that created those. I can see she created them on the 3rd, the 5th, and the 11th of December. So you can create some pretty good audit reports and get real creative. So that is the report designer. Again, Christy's going to talk about where we're going with this in the future, but for now we're going to cover a little bit about our CFO dashboard, and then we're going to finish up the session with our roadmap because we are investing heavily in this area. So I will give it back to Christy.
All right, so we're just going to take a quick look at the CFO workspace. So I think a lot of you throughout the last couple days have seen some of the Power BI, embedded analytics work that's been going on. Maybe some of you have attended some of the sessions with TJ and Melinda and have seen some of this. So one of the goals that we really have is to bring more of the analytical information into operations directly. And we're doing this through the workspaces. So this is just one example. The CFO is kind of unique in that typically the CFO really doesn't do a lot within operations. They're typically not going and looking at transactions and logging transactions and things such as that. Actually, I'm going to jump over to this other. This data is really bad for this one. I'm actually going to look at it on this. Yeah, I'll just refresh it here quick. This company has better data, so we'll bring it up here. So the CFO workspace is maybe a little different than your typical workspace. It's not going to have your tiles where you actually see the counts of like the number of journals that are unposted and things like that. It's really focused specifically on your analytics. So what we've done with the CFO workspace is bring together data from general ledger, AP, AR, bank, things that we see CFOs typically requesting. At the bottom, you can see there are some tabs. Hopefully you can see there's some tabs. We first have an overview page to start with, and what we're showing here is a combination of GL, AR, AP, bank data. Some things that we think are probably the most important things. So for example, we can see our total net income at the top, revenue, expenses. These are KPIs also, so you can see they're actually going to show red or green. depending on where we're at. It's comparing it to our budget. You can see the goal, maybe can't see it underneath there. It's pretty small. But we are doing actual versus budget for these KPIs. And then current ratio and gross margin. We're showing those to the side, and we often get questions around, well, where am I defining the goal for those? What we've done is we've actually done a calculation within the Power BI content pack itself. So all you would need to do is go to the content pack and change that calculation goal from 3 or whatever we'll ship it with, and just change it to whatever your goal is as an organization, and then that will get consumed by the KPI. We're showing expenses by account category, revenue by region, and then at the bottom is our cash flow forecast, where it's showing the projected inflows, red is the outflows, and then the line is the projected balance of the bank account itself. So again, just bringing all of this information together into one workspace. As I was mentioning earlier, some things we're looking at for the future is potentially even adding links in here to the financial statements for the CFO, because that CFO is going to want to see those financial statements and actually being able to publish or push those final financials into this place for the CFO. I'll just go across the bottom real quick. So finance tab is next. This is really more focused around the general ledger area for more of the KPI type things. You can see we have a little bit more here. We have the current ratio. We have accounts payable, accounts receivable in total from a GL perspective. Our expenses, actual versus budget. Same thing with revenue, actual versus budget. And then sales, now we're actually looking more at subledger type information. So this is not looking at GL tables, but now actually sales tables. So we're pulling a lot of the same KPIs you're going to see like in your credit and collections workspaces, and your sales and your purchasing workspaces. So we're really just combining that all together. So we have top 10 customers by revenue, top 10 products by revenue. Here's our age trial balance for the customer perspective. If we go over to purchasing, kind of a similar view, top 10 vendors, top 10 products. Here's our purchasing trends. You can see we're actually showing purchases by month or by day. We can also drill up or down to see this at like a quarterly level or a weekly level or a monthly level. So you do have different levels that we can define in these reports. And then the last tab we have here is bank. So again, we're going to repeat the cash flow forecast, but it also gives you additional information such as the bank account balances themselves or the balance by currency. So going across your bank accounts and actually showing that. So what we're doing with all this data is this is cross-company. We get that request a lot, is this is great, but I need it across my whole organization. So everything you are seeing is cross your entire organization. Some little things I'll point out here. We do have the filters automatically showing that are defined from within the content pack. So if you want to filter this to a specific legal entity, you can use your filters over on the side. Another really important one that we hear often is I need to be able to filter this by dimensions. That is another big thing that will be coming in the spring. So if I want to filter all of my data to just a specific cost center, I can come in here and select that cost center. And the data might not be good for it, but we'll see. But basically everything that we're now seeing on that report is now filtered based on that specific cost center that's selected. So that's a preview of what we've done with the CFO workspace. Any comments, feedback? This is actually still work in progress. Is there things we're missing? We would love to know. Or things that look great, we'd love to know that also.
Yep. Looks great. Is this the only thing that you're working on? Do you having other dashboards similar to CFO dashboards?
Yeah, so the question is there more coming than just the CFO? Absolutely. There's a big credit and collections workspace where they have a bunch of analytics that were introduced and will be added for the spring release. I know this SCM team is adding a lot of analytics to their workspaces. So yes, as a trend, you will see a lot of additional analytics added to all of the workspaces out of the box. These are embedded. And I know some of you, if you didn't attend, I know some people had questions on licensing. If the stuff that is embedded, you don't actually need a separate license for Power BI. It is just there. It's included in your operation license. Some of you don't care, some of you do. So that's kind of an important thing to know, at least for the embedded. Of course, you still have the option to do Power BI just like usual. And a lot of our workspaces, you could actually add your own Power BI content reports. That's still going to be supported moving forward also.
And another question. So, from a security perspective, you said that this is going to look at across the board all organizations that we have. Is it by design? I mean, because there might be scenarios where there are two CFOs, two different legal entities.
Sure.
And they would not oversee each other's stuff.
Yeah, the question is around security and what if I want the CFO to only see a subset. Right now, the security is just completely driven off of access to the menu item. So if you have access to the menu item, you have access to all of the data. I know that that's a hole that we're trying to work on with the BI framework team because we do have similar requirements around I only want to see my department and I don't want anyone else to see my department. So those are all things that we'll be working on. Yep. Question? Do we have any CFO feedback? We have in the past, but we would love more. Yes, so like we said, this is a work in progress. We have not shipped this yet, so we are very free to change this and add things and modify things. But yeah, we definitely always go and talk to customers and partners and kind of test things out and see, if where we're going is down the right path. It's always tricky with BI, though, because every CFO is going to want different data, right? So, the beauty of BI is that you can move things around, right? So if something, you don't want it on the main overview tab, but maybe you want it on one of the other sub-tabs, you can do that type of change to it to make it more personalized. All right. Yeah, question?
Concerning financial reporting, is there a way or will there be a way to configure some sort of an automatic share of reports?
Yeah, so the question is around financial reporting, will there be a way to automate sharing reports? It's definitely on our short list. It kind of gets a little bit to the whole publishing, end-to-end workflow of the reports. Yeah, we've talked a little bit about like automatically sending emails based on like the owner of a department. We've kind of discussed that. But yes, we want to look at more scheduling capabilities and how to get those more automated, automatic. You can still do the scheduling within Designer to get the report generated, but it's also taking that one step further and potentially even having the schedule for automatically publishing and sending it or putting it to a SharePoint site. Yeah, not there yet, but that's really where we want to get to. Yes, it is on a pretty short list. So I'm actually going to jump back, if I can get back to, there we go. I forgot to come back here. That's all right. We've already talked about the embedded analytics. Just the roadmap. So we've kind of alluded a little bit to where we want to go. I would hope everyone has seen this URL before. So this is our public roadmap of features that we are working on. And this includes everything that we're doing around financial reporting. So a couple big ones that we'll kind of talk a little bit about. Number one, I've mentioned this in a few sessions already. A lot of you are familiar that today we use a data mart. That data mart will be going away, and we are going to be using the entity store instead. So we are going to be moving everything for reporting into the entity store, probably we're hoping June, July timeframe of this year. So that data mart will go away, and really the benefit that gives you is that the entity store is really controlled by you as the end user for how often those entities are refreshed and updated. So you can go into the entity store, and it's right within operations. Hopefully everyone is kind of familiar with that. If you go into operations and just search on entity store, there is an entity store page. You will see all of the entities that are used for different reporting purposes. Those will show there. So you can go and schedule your own, recurrence for how often those are refreshed. So we will be getting to that point of getting rid of that data mart and using that instead and giving you more control. The other thing, too, that gives us a couple different things is we can actually do a lot better support of subledger type information. because it will be a lot easier for us to add additional information into these entities rather than to have to add it into the data mart. So we're slowly getting there. That's coming. It actually is on the roadmap. You'll see it if you click on that. That's listed there. A couple other things we talked about already were the generate. That is also listed on the roadmap. So you'll see that also there. One thing that we don't have on the roadmap, because we're pretty in the infancy stages of it, and April alluded to it a little bit, is that the whole report designer, that Click Once experience, we are looking to move all of that into operations. So really modernizing it. We don't know what the tool will be yet, but really making it, of course, we still have to make sure that this is we call Phyllis, the accounting manager. That's our persona name that we use internally. We need to make sure Phyllis can do this, right? So we need to make sure that she can go in and design that financial report just like April showed with the report designer. This cannot be an IT experience, so it's got to be an end user experience. So we are just starting the process right now. We call it SFE internally, which is scenario-focused engineering, of working through this big project of replacing the report designer with this new tool to create financial reports. So we are always looking for feedback. So if anyone is interested in participating in that, we're just starting some wireframes now. We're going to be doing a time box actually this coming week on it. So we would love to have customers, partners, whoever, give us feedback on it. We can set up conference calls and go through wireframes and just get feedback on it. So that's kind of where we're going. Question?
So maybe is kind of the definition between the data mart and entity store. Is it just that is the entity store part of the database and that it doesn't sit outside as a separate database? What's the difference between? Is it just a name change?
No, yeah. So there's a question also around the database. Yeah, it is not. It no longer will be in a separate database. It will be part of the operations database. Yes. So there's a lot of benefits it gets, not only for us internally, but also for you externally as customers and partners.
So the entity store data is populated by the aggregate measures that are created out of the box. One of the really cool things that Christy, I think, mentioned that we get from that is the ability to extend those entities. So not only do we get subledger data, but if you add your own fields, you can extend those entities, and now financial reporting will finally be able to consume them once we redesign it. So it's a single location for all your reporting BI data. So the data mart will go away. The entity store, you'll see it. It's called the AXDW. Those two terms are kind of the same. And it's really a secondary database of data outside of operations. So, yeah.
Would that probably mean in future we might be seeing non-financial data coming into?
Yeah, so the question is, in the future, will you see non-financial data coming in? Absolutely. That's our goal. I want to be able to do a P&L by vendor, and I don't want my vendor to be a financial dimension. That's what we want to get to, where you can report on different dimensions, generically dimensions, not just financial dimensions, but just dimensions in general. That's ultimately where we want to get. And of course, it's more for internal, right? It's more of the managerial reporting. It's not, obviously for your external, but we want to support both.
And kind of an extension to this question, do you see this sitting on CDS, CDM in the future, so we kind of channel in different systems and do, let's say, consolidation using CDS?
Yeah, so the question is, do we see this sitting on top of CDS, so that common data service? Yes. Kind of the goal would be more for consolidation type scenarios, right, where you've got multiple instances of ERPs. It could even be multiple operations instances where we could all publish the data to the CDS, and then we can use that for consolidation purposes.
Yeah. I think architecturally we don't know yet if the entity store will read from CDS and we'll consume
Yeah,
entity store.
where we'll read from.
That's all being worked out. CDS isn't able to handle the transaction volume yet, so it would probably be more at that consolidation higher level
or summary.
Until that expands. But yes, we're looking at that whole picture on how we can get data in from other business applications. So, absolutely.
After this is complete, what do I need a management reporter for?
When we redesign it,
So the question is, when this is complete, why do you need management reporter?
it will
Remember, we don't.
It will replace it.
Yes.
remember, this is not management reporter, right?
Well,
So,
but
so yeah, I mean, it's,
yeah, we'll take a phased approach. So we'll start introducing, because if we just publish something and replace financial reporting / management reporter today, that's going to take a while.
gonna
So
take a while.
we'll probably start with basics, maybe let you do P&Ls, maybe let you do balance sheets, and then get to more complex reports. So we'll probably do kind of a dual release for quite a long time until we get some level of parity before we phase out the
Yeah.
designer as it is today. So that we won't just cut people
yeah,
off.
we're not going to
So-
cut you off and say, sorry,
Yeah,
can't do
so
consolidations anymore.
This will
'cause-
become the replacement for the Click Once designer.
Yep. Question? Yes. Yep. So so the question is, we previously had the ability to link external spreadsheets. Yes, that's one of those areas. Again, I mentioned earlier we don't have support for yet. We do have a pretty good list of those holes that we need to backfill. So that's one. Comments I mentioned earlier is another one. The report building block or the building block groups, we don't have that concept anymore. We have one just called the default one, but we don't have that capability to have the separate groups anymore. So there's a few things like that, even consolidation across different instances. We're going to be reliant on CDS to be able to fill that hole. So hopefully that should be something we can hopefully address pretty soon. I'm trying to think. Is there any other holes?
that's the
I'm
big
trying to
one.
think of other things that we have to fill. I think that touches on the big ones. Any other questions? How are we doing for time here? I'm not even
We still have about
4 minutes.
questions.
April mentioned earlier, she does have another consolidation session right in this room next. So if you do want to get deeper into some information around consolidated reports, you can stay for that. Our contact information is in the deck, so we are always open to emails, to suggestions. If you want to participate in some of the new wireframe, feedback sessions, we would love to hear from you. Of course, fill out your surveys, all that fun stuff. But otherwise, any more questions before we end?
Thank you for being here on the last day.
Yes.
Safe travels for all those leaving.